Finovate showcases cutting-edge banking and financial technology through a global conference series featuring short-form demos and thought leadership. Now, the conversation continues on the Finovate podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Finovate podcast. We are joined today by Luke Williams, professor of innovation at NYU Stern School of Business, founder of Idea Skills, and author of the book Disrupt. Luke is going to be joining us on stage at FinovateFall this coming September. Luke, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thanks, Greg. Pleasure to be here.
So obviously, we don't want to give too much away. You want to learn more about what Luke is going to be talking about. You should come and see us at FinovateFall. But for those of our audience who haven't heard of you before, I should say, can you start by just giving us a quick background on yourself and what brings you to the various crossroads that you find yourself now?
Yeah, sure. Well, as your listeners can tell, I'm not from around here. So I grew up in Australia. And my background is industrial design, so product design. And Australia's a great career for marketing products that have been made elsewhere. But I really wanted to get a seat at the table where the decisions on these products were being made. So basically, I cut off my left arm, or would have cut off my left arm, to get over to America to start working for some of these bigger brands. And I did that. I started working for a company called Frog Design, which got famous doing a lot of work for, first of all, Sony with the Sony Walkman. And then that attracted a young guy called Steve Jobs. And he wanted the same success for a company he was starting called Apple. And so he brought the company that was doing the work for Sony over to America. And that's how Frog got started. So they were quite famous in the product design game. And I had a tremendous career there as a creative director, and then got involved in education. When I moved to New York, NYU was looking to put more innovation in the MBA curriculum. And so I started a course there and joined the faculty full-time. I've been a professor in innovation and design for about the last sort of 15 years at NYU. And along the way, I wrote a book called Disrupt, which is really putting all these ideas into, practical form that other people can use.
Yeah, a lot of interesting experiences there, and certainly it's great to have your opinions so well grounded in so many different areas of the innovation ecosystem. I'm really intrigued by the idea that you can teach innovation, or at least teach strategies designed to produce disruptive unexpected solutions. So obviously, this is something you cover in detail in your book, Disrupt, but can you give us an idea of how you can systemize the process of breaking systems?
Yeah, the question I get the most is, can you really teach innovation? Which is ridiculous when you think about it. I think innovation is where marketing was about 50 years ago. Everyone thought marketing couldn't be taught about 50 years ago, but there were people sort of working to codify it and get it into a form where it could be taught. And I think we're at that stage with innovation. I always use a cooking metaphor because I find it empowering for people that have never thought innovation is sort of their game. But if you look at all the cooking shows on American TV, I mean, it seems like we're obsessed with cooking. In fact, actually, we don't like cooking. We like watching other people cook. But the next time you're watching one of these shows, look at all the different personalities. There's range of ages, there's mix of genders, every educational background imaginable, but none of us doubt that any of these people can cook, because we know that cooking's nothing more. Well, then you take the ingredients and you arrange them into a meal. And I want people to have the same attitude towards innovation. I define ideas as the recipes we use to rearrange things, our resources, to create new value and wealth. So I want people to think of innovation like cooking. You're taking the resources you have available, you're seeking a new arrangement of those resources that makes them more valuable. That's what innovation is all about, and that can be taught.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to go watch the movie Ratatouille again based on this. I think that anyone can cook, yeah. Right? That's the idea. Anyone can
cook.
Yeah, and exactly. So I think I love that analogy. Now, obviously, we're talking about this as being something universal that anybody can do, but are there traits that you look for among your students that make you feel confident that they'll be able to implement your ideas? Are there certain characteristics that you think make people more likely to be successful as innovators?
It's an interesting subject. There's always an article on, the 5 traits that an entrepreneur must have, or, the successful traits of innovators. Whenever I see an article with a title like that, I run the opposite way. because I'm not asking anyone to change their personality. And I think we've been stuck in this cult of personality model of leadership and innovation for a really long time, celebrating the likes of Elon Musk and Steve Jobs on the cover of glossy magazines. And, if you read the Steve Jobs biography or read these magazine articles, it's very much about, their behavioral antics, how they acted with different people. So as a result today, you get a lot of managers who know that innovation is important, want to know how to lead it, and they're going around trying to mimic the personality traits of an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs. And I just think this approach is just ridiculous. Innovation leadership does not have anything to do with your personality. Whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, it doesn't matter. It's about learning the process, learning the tactics, learning the techniques. And like any other skill, the more you practice, the better you get. I will say, though, I teach in America and I've taught some courses in China. What I found interesting about the Chinese students versus the American students, the Chinese students were so excited about innovation. I actually nicknamed them the vibrating students because every time I walked into class, they literally were vibrating with excitement. They've been told that China can't innovate and they're fast followers and all the innovation comes from the West. And they were so excited about this course because it was teaching them, the tools and techniques and the process. And they were so open and eager to embrace that. Whereas some of the American students, we have to work a little bit harder to get them excited. And at times there's an arrogance that comes across thinking, well, just because, I'm in this country and we have this culture of innovation, this makes me by right an innovator. And there's more resistance to actually learning the process and actually embracing the process. So that's been an interesting finding. So what I would say to people is we're typically pretty bad at innovation. So in order to get better at innovation, just be open to learning as many techniques and tools as you can. It's not a natural ability. In fact, it's quite counterintuitive, most of the skills you need for innovation. So embrace the frameworks, embrace the tools, and actually give them a go.
I love that answer. And I think it's something which I've certainly noticed as well, working with a lot of startup founders who come across our stage. The founders who come in who are going to do a live demo and understand that they need to learn something new in order to be successful at that typically do a much better job on stage than the founders who the very first time I talk to them give me the, I've totally got this. I speak all the time. Right. And you kind of hear the ego through the phone. And those are the companies that I worry about getting up there on stage and thinking, oh man, you need to learn something here. And I'm worried that you're not going to. And so those, I can absolutely see that side of it. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit because I know your expertise goes well beyond the world of financial services. You mentioned a little bit at the beginning, but can you kind of walk through again some of the industries in which you've worked?
When I started at Frog, it was very much focused on product design. So a lot of, I started in Silicon Valley. There was a lot of tech products. But then an interesting thing happened in anyone involved in sort of innovation consulting and companies like Frog Design and IDEO. Those services started getting commodified. So, like many other services, people were shipping them sort of overseas and could find industrial designers at a cheaper rate over there. So what happened with companies like Frog Design is clients used to come to us and say, this is the widget we make. We need to design a better widget. But what started happening was that things were growing so complex and things were changing so fast in industry after industry. What we had is a lot of clients coming to Frog and saying, we used to make this widget. We still make some of these widgets, but we're not sure if we should continue to make this widget, or we're not sure what we should make in the future. So the range of services became much more strategic. And, the whole process moved much further upstream, as we like to say. So much more strategy was involved, trying to work out, what these companies should do. So that actually took me out of, working with a lot of tech companies into working with a lot of companies in every conceivable industry, service providers, people in finance companies that I'd never worked with before because they don't do a lot of technology products. So really, I have worked in, 30 plus industries and 120 different countries at the moment. And I typically work with 50 companies a year, everything from startups to Fortune 100 companies. And what that enables me to do is step back and connect the dots. And I can start, because what I find is the executives in one industry are often unaware of the accelerating change in industries other than their own.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now I'm going to lob you just the biggest softball of all time here, but are there aspects of finance and fintech in particular that make you think they're particularly ripe for disruption? And I mean, that's just a tee-off pitch right there.
Well, when I'm talking to every industry, I always look at the foundational concepts that the industry is working with. And what you'll be surprised with when these foundational concepts were conceived. So most of the ideas that people are working with, and remember, the ideas that we're working with, the beliefs that we're working with day in, day out, are behind every action that we take in the business. So there's always an idea or a belief or a foundational concept behind the actions that we're taking. Now, I know we're all obsessed with getting stuff done, but getting stuff done normally means getting stuff done within the assumed boundary of that foundational concept or idea or belief. And many of these ideas were conceived by somebody else in a different age and a different context. So when we look at financial services and banking, we're still working with and within the boundaries of foundational concepts and ideas that were conceived of over at least 50 years ago, and sometimes 100 years. Now, of course, a lot of things have changed in 100 years. A lot of things have changed in 50 years. A lot of things have changed in the last 10 years. The technology changes a lot faster than our foundational concepts. So often there is a lag there. So the first thing that I look at, what are some of the things we're taking for granted? What are some of the assumptions that have been made around these old ideas and these old concepts? How can we start to break those down before we can even start to consider or have a productive dialogue around new ideas?
Yeah, I think that the mentality shift and looking past, the way things have always been done is especially difficult in the financial services space. And talking with a lot of bankers myself over the years, I've learned that the word disrupt itself can actually be really polarizing. There's a lot of bankers who sometimes hear that word and get this kind of visceral reaction because on the one hand, it means this is something new and exciting. On the other hand, and I think this is how a lot of bankers see it, a disruption means costly downtime, legal ramifications, compliance problems, lost customer trust. There's a lot of different things that can happen with this word disruption and most of them aren't pleasant, I think, from the standpoint of a banker. And so you can sort of see how the industry itself is stuck in some of that old thinking. But how do you reconcile the idea of disrupting an industry that's historically, and I think necessarily, averse to risk?
Yeah, we have to start viewing disruption as a positive and not a negative. There is a myth of disruption that it creates instability, but that's a false narrative. Basically, anyone working in a business is working in a system, and it's a business within an industry. So it's a system within a system. So system dynamics apply. If you've only got a system with one feedback loop, which is a reinforcing feedback loop, which means you're just getting better at doing exactly what you're doing. You're just getting better at doing it a little faster, a little cheaper, a bit more efficiently. This is a single reinforcing feedback loop. Now, in systems, that is an unstable system. Sooner or later, those same mechanisms that, are fueling your success are going to flip into reverse and accelerate your decline. And this is why we see so many companies that seem like in incredibly dominant positions like Nokia, Kodak, Blockbuster, BlackBerry, you name it, all of a sudden become irrelevant overnight and sometimes go bankrupt overnight. And it's because these same reinforcing mechanisms flipped into reverse and accelerated their decline. So in order to grow your business and your industry, even your career in a sustainable way, you need to create stability, a stable system. Stable systems have balancing loops. And in terms of innovation and thinking about the capabilities we'll need for the future, that stabilizing loop is introducing deliberate discontinuity. So ideas that might be inconsistent or in direct conflict with what you're currently doing, what's making you successful right now. And that's what disruption's all about. It's about introducing disruptive ideas to actually strengthen your system, make you more adaptable, make you prepared for the capabilities that you will actually need for the future. I often sum that up by saying, a leader's ability to challenge assumptions is more important than their ability to reinforce them. And that's what it comes down to. So you've got to get into that habit of challenging assumptions, not reinforcing them.
No, and I think we've seen over the past couple of years, a couple of really high-profile instances where we've all been reminded in very painful ways how fragile many aspects of the current system actually are and how ripe they are for innovation. And I think we've got this moment right now where we're starting to see a reckoning on the part of the industry as a whole, saying we need to change. There's an appetite to embrace new technologies that wasn't there even 5 or 10 years ago. And so there's a lot of optimism that you can point to from that, but certainly there are still a number of people who are mired in those past ways of thinking. And so I'm afraid we're going to have to cut it off here. But as I mentioned, Luke is going to be joining us at FinovateFall in September. He'll be speaking on the 13th, and there will be a networking opportunity after his session. So do come check us out there. Check out the book Disrupt. And in the meantime, Luke, thanks again for taking the time to chat.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. Looking forward to Finovate in the fall.
The Finovate podcast is produced by Informa Connect in association with Provoke.fm Media. Check out Finovate.com for information on Finovate's upcoming shows and to learn how you can get involved. The discount code Finovate Podcast will save you 20% on tickets to all of our events. And you can email us at info@finovate.com for information on sponsoring, speaking, or demoing. Thanks for listening.